is to try to get to a good understanding of the Quran and get to an understanding of what the seerah of Rasulullah was. The difficulty, though, is that for getting to the seerah of Rasulullah, we are not eyewitnesses. And necessarily, we need to find some intermediary to convey the information from Rasulullah to us. And the difference is, amongst different schools, who are the intermediaries that were looking to convey that message from Rasulullah to ourselves. So the Quran talks about munafiqeen amongst the companions of Rasulullah warns people that there are people who are lying, fabricating false information about him during his lifetime, and he threatens lying during Rasulullah's time. What's to stop them? They'll flourish him more once he's gone, and they can fabricate lies with impunity without Rasulullah there to correct them and to refute what they're saying. The second category are people who simply, through a level of ignorance and naivete, they heard from Rasulullah and didn't necessarily understand what he was saying. So they have a lack in their understanding in line with what Rasulullah intended. So of course that's even if they're trying to convey information, but they didn't understand, and so we are now victims of their lack of understanding, and whatever we're receiving from Rasulullah through them is going to be inaccurate, it's going to be incomplete. The third category he mentions, maybe a little bit better in one way. They had a good understanding. They were smart. They could receive, they could remember, they could convey. And I was in the middle of a thought. You heard the tail end of the thought, you missed the front end of the thought. It's not your fault, it wasn't a bad intention of your message, but maybe why if you're with misunderstanding, you quote part of what I said, but you missed the other part, so you don't have the full context. It's a problem. It's not wrong, you didn't do something bad, but it is a problem in receiving, and then we, as the ones who are counting on this person as an intermediary, us and Rasulullah, we're going to get a partial message. The reality is that we have the way the message is communicated, whether. And so the Quran, for instance, tells us, impress upon us how much of a blessing he's given us. He says, eat of the seed. But as far as that, you know, it's not the full message, that there are some implications for what comes from the seed. There are some caveats. I can't just take anything from the seed that I catch and then eat it. Certain things from the seed are halal, certain things from the seed are also haram. They can understand it has to be fish, not non-fish. And fish with scales, not fish without scales. So two important caveats are there. Candy, for instance, lobsters or candy clams and oysters. Because that's not in the verse of the Quran. The Quran simply says Allah is not trying at that point. The message is not, let me tell you the details of the filth of what you can and cannot eat from the seed. His point there is to awe us and impress us with this great blessing of seafood that He's given us. And at that point, when you're trying to impress on someone how a great bounty, a great favor I've given to you, that's not the time to say, but there's a footnote here, a footnote there, not this, and that's not the time to mention all those things. You just get the big picture. The seafood has been made big, and the thing that impresses us and said, oh wow, this is a great blessing Allah's given us. Then the prophet comes along, the imams come along and tell us the details of the fiqh, so when we're trying to eat from the seed, we know what to avoid. That's the way fiqh works, that's the way communication works. But the reality is that a person who only hears a part of the message and doesn't hear the rest of the message and doesn't know which parts of the message that have been given to them over these 22 years of the Prophet's prophetic mission. He might have said something in the beginning and then it changed, or he gave a partial message here and a partial message there. The right answer, the right understanding requires that a person have all of those pieces of the puzzle and put them together accurately. And know whether both are true and they're both uh, um, complementary to one another, and you put them both together, now you have the complete message. Or whether one was right for a time and now it's been superseded by another. It's been abrogated by another. The first message is now no longer accurate, no longer what you're supposed to act on. It's the second message you're supposed to act on. Or whether one was a general statement and now subsequently different caveats and footnotes and all these have been added to it. The different dynamics of those texts, of those words of the Prophet, and before we can accurately understand what his whole teaching was, we have to have all pieces of the puzzle in front of us and know how to put them together. Which pieces are outdated and have to be cast out, which pieces are still relevant, how they fit together, all of that's so important. So then we get to the fourth category, which is where we left off and where we'll start again today, inshallah. Besides Allah. So Amir Mu'min tells Sulaym ibn Qais that these teachings of Rasulullah have come to you through a fourth type, a fourth category of intermediaries. The stand between Rasulullah and yourself. There's a fourth intermediary, a fourth source of the hadith of Rasulullah, who has never attributed a lie to the Messenger of God, who in fact detests lies for fear of God and out of respect for the Messenger of God. He did not forget, rather he memorized whatever he heard as it was spoken, and he conveys it as he heard it, without adding to or removing from it. He's speaking in the third person, but who is he referring to? It's himself. He's describing himself in the third person. Yes, there are four categories of people hypothetically. This is a category, but the only person who was able to live up to this standard and convey the message in this way is Amir Mu'min himself. He knows the rulings that abrogate from the rulings that are abrogated by them. So let me just briefly give you some examples of these things. Sometimes I mentioned them in passing. So one of the ways that legislation takes place, not only in Islam, even our civil legislation takes place in this way. Sometimes you have a law that is relevant for a time, and then for some reason it is outdated, no longer relevant, and has to be changed and replaced. This, in our Islamic legal system, is referred to as naskh. Naskh, we call it abrogation in English. Right, so one example of this, there are two good examples. Let me give you one example and maybe that'll be good enough to illustrate the point. So this is an example. Let me also say that sometimes we talk about abrogation and naskh. We're talking about verses of the Quran abrogating other verses of the Quran. That's one way. Sometimes Allah sends a verse down earlier, and then maybe He wants us no longer to act on that, and He replaces it with a new verse. Another way this can happen is in the teachings of Rasulullah himself. Early on, He might teach the Muslims to do something, and later on He says, no longer do you act on that, now the new ruling is something else. And sometimes it's a mix. Sometimes the Rasulullah was doing something before, and now Allah sends down a verse saying, no longer act on that, here's the new rule. So this example I'm going to give you is the third kind. When the verse of Quran came down, legislating the fast of Ramadan, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. That's the piece of the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah says, whoever of you is present in his home, in his hometown, then he should fast. Alright, so this is legislating the fast, and from that time, the Muslims began to fast. That took place in the second year of the Hijrah, just before the Battle of Badr. The Badr also took place in Ramadan, and so just before the Battle of Badr, 17 days before, this verse comes down and legislates that from this month of Ramadan, you all are going to fast. there are 4 verses altogether in Surah Al-Baqarah that legislate this fast. Then there's a 5th verse, if I'm not mistaken, it's verse 187. 187 begins with أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُم هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ كُنتُمْ تَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَكُمْ فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَعَفَا عَنكُم فَالْآنَ باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الابيض من الخيط الاسود من الفجر ثم اتم الصيام الى الليل. So this verse comes down and it's an interesting verse because it's changing something up, it's abrogating something. Allah is suddenly saying that on the nights of the fast, you are now allowed to have conjugal relations between husbands and wives. It's a new idea. The previous verses didn't say anything about this, but the fact that in 187 he suddenly introduced this idea that it's now permissible for you to have relations between husbands and wives, this means that previously that was not allowed. And similarly, he says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. But now you are allowed to eat from the nighttime all the way up until Fajr time, implying that previously this was not allowed category. Let me say this in plainer terms. So what we understand from the dynamic of these verses is that when the fast was legislated, there were 2 major differences from what we now practice. So right now, when we fast in the month of Ramadan, we fast from Fajr time all the way until Maghrib time. And once Maghrib comes, then all those things that are haram during the fast are now halal. Correct? There are no restrictions at night during the month of Ramadan. Neither conjugal relation, neither eating nor drinking. There are no restrictions. But this verse number 187 tells us that prior to 187's coming down, there were these 2 restrictions. One was that for the entire month of Ramadan, even at the nighttime when you're not fasting, no conjugal relations were allowed. That's how it was legislated at first. That's how Rasulullah practiced it. That's how we taught people to practice it. But people couldn't handle it. And they were breaking the rules, secretly feeling guilty about it. And so Allah in the verse tells them that Allah knows that you are breaking the rule, that you are doing khiyana. You're betraying Allah by breaking this rule. So now He's decided to lower the bar, to make things easier for you. And from now on, He allows you to have conjugal relations during the night of the fast. And similarly, it seems that when they first started fasting, say when you're at the end of the fast, you're very tired, you pray your Maghrib, say maybe you eat something, and then you fall asleep. And then you wake up after 2 hours after your nap. In the early days, since you slept, you're not allowed to eat anything else. That's it. Once you sleep, post-Maghrib, then no more eating until the next iftar. No sahur. If you want to eat something, then you got to stay awake. As long as you stay awake after Maghrib, then you can eat and drink. But once you sleep, that's it. Then no more eating until the next iftar. That was tough for people. You can imagine, even for us it would be tough. In the heat of Medina, it would be very difficult. So 187 says, okay, Allah sees that it's hard for you, He sees you can't handle it, so now He's allowing you for the entire night from Maghrib until Fajr, you can eat and drink. No restriction. Even if you sleep and you wake up, you can still eat. Like we do now, we sleep most likely, and then wake up for sahur, and then eat something before the fast begins. So my point is that this is an example of nas, of abrogation, where when the fast was first legislated by the Quran, Rasulullah showed people how to fast, and the way He showed them was difficult, according to what Allah told Him to teach them, but it was difficult. So then Allah comes and abrogates that difficult aspect of the fast in these 2 ways, and He abrogates them, changes them, and says, now He's lifted these 2 difficult restrictions, and you're now free to engage in these activities. So this is an example of nas, of abrogation. So now imagine in our scenario, if you're one of those first 3 categories of people, only the first category, the second and third category of people who who were narrating the teachings of Rasulullah and say that you only heard the first part of the teaching of Rasulullah, that the fast means these two restrictions also. And you never pay attention to the fact that it's been abrogated and made easy. And now you go on and you convey this to your village and to your tribe and you spread it throughout the land, and all Muslims who learn from you, they think that the way Rasulullah taught them to fast is very difficult. And they never understand that it was difficult, but now Allah has made it easier for you. They don't get the easy message. That's inaccurate. They're now fasting in a way that's overly difficult, overly burdensome, and they drive them away. They say, I can't do this fast, I can't be Muslim. All because this person only conveyed part of the message, it didn't have the full message. Whereas Amir is saying, I was one who accurately, completely translated everything that I got from Rasulullah, including what was abrogating and what it abrogated. So you get the full message of what is da'wah legislated. So it says, accordingly, this fourth category person, which is himself, acts on and believes in and transmits the format. We go back on. He knows the rulings that abrogate from the rulings that are abrogated by them. So he acts on and believes and transmits the things that abrogate and abandons the latter, the things that are abrogated. Do not be surprised at the occurrence of abrogation in the traditions of the Prophet, for the traditions of the Prophet are like the Quran. There are some that abrogate and others that have been abrogated. So I see an example of abrogation of supplanting an old ruling with a new ruling for some wisdom. In the case of human legislation, it's because we make mistakes. We pass the law, and then we realize this law is not working. So we have to change the law because we made a mistake. In the case of Allah, He doesn't make mistakes. It's not out of ignorance that He passes one law first and then passes another law later and changes it. There are different kinds of wisdom that are behind His abrogation of laws. In this case, the example I gave you, likely, the purpose is, in many cases, when Allah first legislated these different tasks, for Hajj, for instance, we have a hadith that tell us that when Allah wanted to legislate Hajj, what He really wanted us to do was that every single year of our lives we should go for Hajj. Not once in your lifetime, every single year. Whether you're able to or not able to, whether you're young or old, that's what Allah wanted, ideally. But He knows that's not possible for people. And so He lowered the bar and made it only for those who are wealthy enough to afford it. Once in their lifetime is sufficient to fulfill their duty. But He tells us, the Imams tell us, that what He really wants to do was something much more. Likewise with the prayers, the famous story of the Mi'raj, when the 80 prayers are legislated, Allah tells Rasulullah that there are 50 prayers that are obligatory on people. And then Rasulullah, with the Council of Musa, he goes back and begs, please lower this burden on my people. And so Allah says, I will reduce it to 5 wajib prayers in a day, but I will give them the reward for these 5 prayers that they offer. I'll give them the reward of 50 prayers. And then Jabal Hassan, someone does a good deed and gets 10 times the reward. So why does Allah go through this whole thing? Allah knows best that we can only do 5 and not 15. Why does He first say 50 and then bring it down to 5? Why does He tell us that He wants us to do Hajj every year and then tell us no one's good enough? So one of the things we understand from this repeated is this same dynamic happens across the board in so many areas of the. One of the effects that it has on us is it should humble us. Sometimes if we are out of touch with reality, we might think if you have a checklist mentality about your Islam. You think, okay, I have my wajib prayers, I do those, check. I pay my homes, check. I've done my Hajj, check. Ziyarah, check. You go through and you have all your check marks for all your duties. I'm good. I'm a great Muslim. And we start to feel content. We start to feel like, I've done my job, I have nothing else to do. To prevent that, Allah gives us this message that don't think that just because you say your 5 wajib prayers regularly every day, that you become something special. You've done just enough to get yourself out of hellfire. That's the bare minimum that I know that the least common denominator of people can handle this much. That's all you've done. Nothing special. If you want to feel, think about the imams who offer 1,000 rak'ah every night. Compare yourself to them. Your 5 half-hearted, distracted prayers that you offer, at most they get you out of hellfire. But don't think that they are somehow getting you something, making you a prophet and making you a God. Right? So it keeps us humble by knowing that even if I do all my prayers, I'm not doing Allah a favor. I'm not reaching some sainthood by doing my five daily prayers. By performing my one Hajj in my life, I shouldn't have errors and feel like now I've done something so great. Allah wanted me to do everything. He's lowered his expectations so much that finally I was able to do one Hajj. I've done the very least that he wanted me to do. Right? So there's wisdom then in abrogating, telling us one thing and then changing, because then we know, even if we do what's required of us by the abrogating verse or the abrogating teaching, we know that what really was in store for us, what really Allah wanted from us, and what we could have done if we only had a higher level of expectation from ourselves, is something much greater. That's a great wisdom in the legislation. Not because Allah is ignorant and He changed His mind and made a mistake, but He was planning this communication in such a way that He gives us this dynamic, this humility, while we are practicing the teachings of Allah and Rasul. Is that clear? Besides Allah. Then it continues and says there are some that are specific and others that are general. So I gave this example yesterday of so he tells us to offer the Salat al-Tawaf around Maqam Ibrahim with no details. Should I say on top, behind, in front? So we talked about this example yesterday. But that's a general verse that we can't really act on until the Imam comes and tells us that specifically you need to be behind Maqam Ibrahim and have Maqam Ibrahim in front of you. That's what Allah means when He says this. But if you only have the verse, then you'll be doing something wrong. You might be praying beside or in front of Maqam Ibrahim, and you're not doing your duty, which is to pray behind Maqam Ibrahim. So you have to have the full picture, the general verse, and also the specific teachings of the Prophet and the Imams. To finally understand what your duty is in Salat al-Tawaf. And then he says there are some that are unequivocal and others that are unclear. So this is another difficult concept in the Quran. We're told that there are muhkamat and mutashabihat that Allah has put in the Quran. Muhkamat are unequivocal and unambiguous. It's absolutely clear what He tells us to do. And then there are mutashabihat, where there's some ambiguity. There are multiple interpretations here. It's not clear right away when you read the verse what exactly He's telling us to do. One example of this is in the verse of wudu. إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. And it continues. So we have a verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Are we okay or do we need to wrap it? Are we safe or do I do anything? Yeah. Recite Salawat. Recite Salawat. So Allah tells us, إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. When you want to stand for prayer, what you have to do? How does He tell us that? He says, then wash your face and wash your arms to the elbow. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. What is He saying here? Wash your hands to the elbow. You stop there, that's the only guidance I got. Then how do I wash my hands to the elbow? Right? Wash your hands to the elbow. But that's not where we're supposed to wash our hands for wudu. We're supposed to start at the elbow and wash down to the fingertips. But the verse is saying, wash your hands to the elbow. This is a confusing verse. It's not clear whether the first meaning you get from the verse is that this is talking about the direction. But the other possibility, the other possible understanding of the verse is that it's talking about the extent of the arm you're supposed to wash. Because in Arabic, in English we say hand. If I say this is my hand, that doesn't make sense. We say arm for this part. This is the hand, this is the arm. But in Arabic, one word, yad, can refer to all of this. This is my yad. Actually, the one who steals, male or female, what you do. The punishment is to chop their yad, their hand. Not their hand here, it's their hand here. The 4 fingers are what's supposed to be chopped. That's called yad. So you can say yad, and it's only referring to these 4 fingers. You can say yad, and it's referring to the entire hand up to the wrist, which is how we use it in English. You can say yad, and it means all the way up to the elbow. You can say yad, and it means all the way up to the shoulders. So all of these different ways of looking at this appendage are all referred to by the word yad. Yes, they have specific words also to refer to different parts, but yad can be used for all of this. So now when he wants us to wash our hands, wash our arms, in English I said wash your arm, till the elbow. So one idea is that it's telling me wash your arm towards your elbow in this direction. One idea is saying wash the arm that's up to the elbow. Not the arm that's up to the shoulder, not the arm that's up to the wrist, not the arm that's only your 4 fingers. Wash the arm that's up to your elbow. Right? So the 2 possible interpretations for the verse, the first one that comes to mind is talking about direction. The Imams come and tell us that no, that's not what he wants. It's just telling us how much of the arm to wash. In terms of direction, it has to be from here to here. That's quite challenging, right? If you see the verse by itself without any sunnah, without any hadith of the Prophet or Imams, then we can all do like our brothers in the sunnah, washing our arms like this. It's only because of guidance from Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt that we understand that the verse is not saying that, rather, this is the direction. So this is an example of a mutashabih verse, an ambiguous verse, where 2 meanings are possible, and in fact the first meaning that comes to mind is wrong. And the only way we can be guided to the right meaning is through the Prophet teaching us. Right? That's very important, that we should have all the pieces of the puzzle. And if we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, we'll do the wrong, we'll do it in this instance. Precise Allah. So he begins praising. Then he says that there are problems that were there at the time of Rasulullah, where sometimes he would mention something, he would teach something to the people, and sometimes you're in a class and the teacher says something, you don't understand what he said, you have questions, but what happens? You're too embarrassed to ask. Right? And so this universal dynamic, Imam Ali says this is what happens to the companions of Rasulullah. Rasulullah would say something, and he was famous for saying things very simply and clearly. One of his characteristics was that he would talk to people at their level. So it's not that he was speaking some highfalutin language and people couldn't keep up with him. The problem was that they were distracted, they didn't pay attention or whatever, but they missed it, but they didn't have the guts to ask the question. So that's going to lead to one of those first 3 categories of a person who doesn't really understand what's being said and it conveys an incorrect message. He says it got to the point that the companions would wish that some Bedouin would come in off the streets and ask the questions. The Bedouins were much more frank, much more kind of, no airs. If they don't understand something, they don't understand something. Tell them. And so they would ask the question that everyone else had on their mind, but they didn't have the guts to ask it. They were hoping this Bedouin and this other person would come off the street and ask it, so they could all each talk on the answer and tell the answers. So this also shows one of the problems of the companions and the transmitters of hadith. They're not all perfect students, always with pen and paper in their hands, ready to write everything the Prophet says accurately, fully, and always following around all the time. They're human beings, no better than you and me. And we know in any class, there are different levels of students. There are some students who are very fastidious, very diligent in taking notes and understanding and reviewing all of that. And there's some who fail. Then he says, I, on the other hand, used to enter the messenger of God's company once each day and once each night, at which time he would meet with me in private. I would follow him mentally wherever he took me. The companions of God's messenger knew that he did this with no one except me. Often our sessions would be in my house. The Messenger of God would come to me. In fact, most of those sessions were in my house. Whenever I would go before him in one of his houses, he would meet with me in private and ask his wife in whose house we were to leave so that no one remained with him except me. But if he came to me to have a private session with me in my house, Fatima would not leave me, nor would any of my children. When I asked him, he would answer me, and when I became silent and my questions had run out, he initiated discussion. Not a verse from the Quran came down upon the Messenger of God, but that he had me repeat it after me. He dictated it to me, and I wrote it in my own writing. He taught me its inner and outer meaning, what abrogates it and what it abrogates, what unequivocal verse it clarifies, what unequivocal verse clarifies it, and what unclear verse it clarifies, and what specific verse restricts it, and what general verse it restricts. So this is the class, the private session between Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. Not once in a while, every single day, twice a day at least. A devoted session where it's just the two of them, and it's not something magical. Sometimes we think that the knowledge of the Imams is only some sort of inspiration and something, just whispering in the ear and a little bit of spin in the ear, and all of a sudden doors and doors open. That also, we have narrations about that kind of knowledge transfer as well. But much of the knowledge transfer was old-fashioned. The teacher teaching, dictating, asking questions, answering, dictating, writing, checking. And that's what these two were engaged in. And through this comprehensive, complete process, we received all of this knowledge from Rasulullah. As a result, he says, I have never forgotten a single verse from the book of God or any knowledge relating to it, which he dictated to me and which I wrote down since he prayed for me thus. He did not leave a single thing that God taught him, whether it be a legal ruling of lawful or unlawful, or a commandment or prohibition. So he goes to list all different things. From all this, I have not forgotten a single letter. And then he says that all these things that Rasulullah taught me, just imagine, Rasulullah has an ocean of knowledge. He has many companions, many people he's meeting, but all of them have small capacities like you and me. The only person who has the capacity to contain all of this is Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then from Amir al-Mu'mineen, the same dynamic happens. The famous Najullah, when he's talking about ilm, he says, إِنَّهَا هُنَالَ عِلْمَ الْجَنَّةِ. I have this vast knowledge here. If only I can find someone to bear this knowledge, to carry it for me. You can't find any students who have the capacity to take the knowledge that he has. The only one who has the full capacity is Imam Hassan. And likewise all the way down. We have one hadith, I'll share this with you at the end, from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He narrates it, Al-Kafi narrates it from Imam Sadiq, and he says that the message that was given by Allah to Rasulullah had a series of seals on it. Imagine, the picture he paints for us is imagine a book, and that book, some pages are open and we have access to them. Some of them are sealed shut. There's a tab, there's some sort of a seal on them that you can't access unless you break the seal. And the hadith tells us that Rasulullah at his time, he accessed the part of that. He had all the knowledge, but he had certain duties that only he was supposed to act on. Then he passed this book on to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and his job was to break his seal and act on his part of the teachings. And likewise, Imam after Imam, he mentions that when Imam Hussein's time came, he opened his seal. So all of this knowledge that's coming down, each ma'soom is disseminating into the level that they can to the people around them. But everyone has limited capacity except for the next ma'soom, the next Hujjah. Everything gets transferred to them, and then they act on what they're supposed to act on, and they teach everything they have to the next Hujjah, and whatever they can to the people around them based on their capacity. So this is the reality of this dynamic. And our goal is to get to the seerah of Rasulullah. The reality is the seerah that we're receiving through books of history, through ahadith, It's from these four sources that we mentioned. And we, as the ones who are trying to access that seerah, we have to somehow figure out who are these channels that I'm getting my information from. The one who's telling me this story, the one who's telling me this incident, this law, is he one of the first category, the second, or the third, or is he the fourth? The only way we can ensure that the knowledge of the seerah that we're getting is accurate is if we make sure that the source of our knowledge is the fourth category, the imams themselves. They are our access points. They are the gateways to the knowledge of the Prophet. DAR-E-ZEHRA is exactly that. The gateway to the city of knowledge is Amir al-Mu'mineen and all of the times after. They are the way that we get into that Medina of the knowledge of the Prophet. So that's all I'm saying. In the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we talked about his departure from Medina. When he arrived in Mecca, he was flooded by letters from Kufa, by the Shia of Ali, who wanted him to come, were tired of and willing to rebel against Yazid and wanted Imam Hussein to come. Thousands of letters come to him in Mecca. He sends his cousin and his trustee, Muslim ibn Aqil, to Kufa to verify the contents of the letters and see what the people's intentions are as they expressed in their letters. Muslim goes to Kufa, settles in the house of Muhtar ibn Ubayd al-Thaqafi, and begins the work of receiving the bayt and allegiance of the people of Kufa in support of Imam Hussein. He sends word to Imam Hussein that yes, things are as they seem to us, and you should rush to come here. In the meantime, certain loyalists of Yazid send word to Yazid telling him that if you care about Kufa, then you need to do something, because if you don't act quickly, then the city is going to be lost to the followers of to the Ahlul Bayt. Yazid sends word to Basra, to someone that even he detested. But he was advised by his advisor that he's the best person for the job. He sends word to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the bloody son of a bloody father, both of whom had perpetrated incredible zulm. And he tells him that you are now to go to Kufa and take charge of Kufa from Muhammad ibn Bashir. When Ibn Ziyad arrives, he uses threats, and one of the most insidious threats that he offers the people of Kufa is that to the tribal heads, if I find out that any one of your members of your tribe is a rebel and you don't out them, tell me about them first, then I will crucify you. You were responsible for every member of your tribe. And it created an atmosphere of terror amongst the people of Kufa. And that loyalty that they expressed to Imam Hussein and to Muslim Aqil quickly melted away. We're told that Muslims' situation became very precarious, and from Muhtar's house, he had to go to Hani ibn Urwa's house. Ibn Ziyad very trickily hires a spy named Ma'qil to find out the whereabouts of Muslim. He offers him a sum of money in support of his cause, and in that way disarms them. They bring him into their circles, and then Ma'qil reports on Muslims' activities and on his whereabouts. Because of all of this scare that Ibn Ziyad created, Muslim has to rush and act on his plans to take over the city quicker than he had hoped. He had hoped to wait until Imam Hussein comes. Now he has to do it quickly because there's such a threat from Ibn Ziyad's side. They launched their revolution. The Shia from all over, they say numbered 8,000, marched and converged on the city hall of Kufa. But very quickly, again with threats and with bribery and trickery, Ibn Ziyad is able to deflate that whole movement, and Muslim Ibn Aqil is left with no supporters. A curfew is imposed on the city of Kufa, and Muslim Al-Aqil is left wandering in the streets of Kufa. We're told that he comes to a house of a woman named Bawa'an, a compassionate and a merciful woman who was at her doorstep wondering where her son Bilal was because the curfew had started and he had not yet returned. Muslim Al-Aqil, seeing her, asks her if he can find some shelter, if he can have some water. She first resists and says that you should go to your own family. The curfew is in place and it's not safe for people to be on the streets of Kufa. Then he introduces himself and he says that I'm actually not from Kufa, I'm from Medina. I'm one of the members of the Hashim, and then gets the dogs and recognizes him as a Muslim. She welcomes him into the home, she gives him a room, and she offers him food and a place to stay for the night and says, if you're safe here, it's only that my son is amongst the soldiers of this governor, so I need to keep you secret from him, otherwise you're safe here. Bilal returns during the night and he sees his mother going back and forth to the room and suspects that Muslim is there. He sends word to his brother, Muhammad ibn Ash'ab. They are brothers that have the same father. And Muhammad ibn Ash'ab, first thing in the morning after the Fajr prayer, comes and he surrounds the house of Bawa'an to see how Muslim hears the sounds of soldiers and horses and armor and prepares himself for battle. He comes out into the courtyard and fights. They surround him, they come up on the roof and the walls, and they throw stones at him. They cause so many injuries on Muslim Al-Aqil, but he fights bravely. He takes the battle out into the street, and legion after legion that comes to fight him are pushed away by Muslim Al-Aqil. Muhammad ibn Ash'ab sends word back to Ibn Ziyad that you have to give the forces is not a simple person for fighting against, it's one of the lines of Al-Hashim. Finally, they injure Muslim so much that he has to give up. Some reports tell us that he was promised amnesty, some tell us that he was brought down and injured and captured. In any case, he is taken into the court of Ibn Ziyad, injured and broken. There's a conversation that ensues between the two. Finally, Ibn Ziyad passes the rule that he's going to be executed. Muslim ibn Aqil says that I have some wasiyas that I have to deposit to somebody, I have some outstanding business. He sees that one of the members of Quraysh is present in the court, Umar ibn Sa'd. And he says that if you give me permission, I'll give my wasiyah to him. Umar, as a loyalist of Ibn Ziyad and Yazid, resists, but Ibn Ziyad insists that he should take the wasiyah. Muslim's last three wasiyas that he gives to him, one is that he has an outstanding debt to some people in Kufa. He says, when I am killed, take my sword and my shield and sell them and pay this debt to those people that I owe money to. Second, he says that when I am killed, please take my body and make sure that it's given in Islamic burial. And third, I give the word to my master of the city that things are safe here. He's coming to a city full of supporters. Now I see things in the truth. He sent word to him, tell him to stay and to go back to Mecca, go back to Medina, anywhere but Kufa. His Kufa is the one who sees him. Ibn Ziyad commands one of his courtiers to take Muslim Al-Aqil to the roof of the DAR-E-ZEHRA. They execute him and they throw his body off of the top of the governor's palace. And he is dragged through the street along with hand and rope, and they try to disgrace them by making a display of the torture and display of their bodies being dragged through the streets. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah wa ala awaq al-nasib عليك مني سلام الله وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد بالنسيان. السلام على المرسلين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Allah, we ask inshallah, Allah, accept these acts of devotion, acts of remembrance that we are engaged in. Help us, inshallah, to become closer to Imam Hussein during these days and nights of Muharram. Help us, in fact, to get closer to the seerah of his grandfather, Rasulullah, to know it, to understand it, and وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد يا حسين 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 علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو جو علمدار تھا اس کا وہ حشم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو آواز سے سیکھنے کی وجاہت کیا ہے حق پہ آ جائے تو پھر حکم شریعت کیا ہے جو ترائی میں ادا کی وہ عبادت کیا ہے یہ عبادت یہ تجمل یہ کرم لے کے چلو جو علمدار تھا اس کا وہ حشم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار علم لے کے چلو ان کے پیرو ہو تو پھر سید و سردار بنو آگ سینوں میں لیے تو لائے بیدار بنو ذوالفقار اسد اللہ کا کردار بنو حق پہ آ جائے تو پھر تیرے دو دم لے کے چلو جو علمدار تھا اس کا وہ حشم لے کے چلو قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار
پیمانے وفا کی قسم زندہ ہے، اب پیاسوں کا وہی ہو حشم زندہ ہے، سازشیں مر گئی مظلوم کا غم زندہ ہے، ساری دنیا یہ مظلوم کا غم لے کے چلو، جو علمدار تھا اس کا وہ حشم لے کے چلو، علم لے کے چلو، قافلہ حق ہے تیار، خاک اور خون میں اڑتا ہے یہ چہرہ چھوٹے سے، جو کٹتا ہے رہے حق میں تو پھر سر بھی کٹے، جب ہو مقتل میں کڑا بار تو پیچھے نہ ہٹے، وہ جو بڑھتا ہے آگے وہ قدم لے کے چلو، جو علمدار تھا اس کا وہ حشم لے کے چلو، قافلہ علم لے کے چلو، قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار، علم لے کے چلو، قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار، علم لے کے چلو، قافلہ حق کا ہے تیار، علم لے کے چلو۔ Say, go, 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 say,
کے دوش پگونجی جو نہیں صدا، سلام علیہ ابن رسول شاہ خدا، خدا کا شکر کے دیدار آپ کا تو ہوا، تمام اسیروں نے دیکھا سوئے در کوفہ، جو لاش لٹکی ہے در پر وہ تھر تھراتی ہے، اور سلام کرنے کی آواز اس سے آتی ہے، تڑپ کے نیزے سے فرق حسین نے یہ کہا، علیکم وطن واراؤ قتل جفا، ادب سے عابد بیماریوں ہوئے گویا، قبول کیجئے مسلم چچا سلام میرا، سنا جو حضرت مسلم بن عقیل کا نام، تو ایک بی بی لگی لاش سے نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم میں یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں احوال کرو کچھ ان کا بیان ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں تھے ساتھ جو میرے دو دل پر تھے ساتھ جو میرے دو دل پر وہ فدیہ کیے میں نے حق پر تھے ساتھ جو میرے دو دل پر وہ فدیہ کیے میں نے جو ساتھ تمہارے تھے ہیں کہاں ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں میں بستی بستی جاؤں گی میں بستی بستی جاؤں گی اور ڈھونڈ کے ان کو لاؤں گی میں بستی بستی جاؤں گی اور ڈھونڈ کے ان کو لاؤں گی بتلائیے کچھ تو ان کا نشان ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کب تک وہ رہے زیر سایہ کب تک وہ رہے زیر سایہ اور جس کو ترس ان پر آیا کب تک وہ رہے زیر سایہ اور جس کو ترس ان پر آیا کیا مل گیا ان کو جائے امان ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں کی زوجۂ مسلم نے یہ پیغام ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں ہے میرے دونوں لال کہاں یا حسین 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 یا حسین
مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین وہ عابد ایمان تھا وہ عابد
بیمار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین وہ زینب کلثوم تھی وہ زینب کلثوم تھی چادر سے جو محروم تھی چادر سے جو محروم تھی محرموں کے درمیان محرموں کے درمیان اور مستجاب کی بیٹیاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین رو کر کہے قاسم کی ماں رو کر کہے قاسم کی ماں مارا گیا قاسم جوان مارا گیا قاسم جوان اے لال میں ڈھونڈوں کہاں اے لال میں ڈھونڈوں کہاں میں تیری سیرا تیرا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین شام غریب بات آ گئی شام غریب بات آ گئی آخر کو غیرت آ گئی آخر کو غیرت آ گئی پہرے پہ زینب آ گئی پہرے پہ زینب آ گئی عباس اور اکبر کہاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین پیارے گلے خنجر چلے پیارے گلے خنجر چلے چادر چینی خیمے جلے چادر چینی خیمے جلے عباس کے پرچم تلے عباس کے پرچم تلے روتی رہی سب بیویاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین رو کر گئے قاسم کی ماں 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 مارا گیا قاسم جوان مارا گیا قاسم جوان اے لال میں ڈھونڈوں کہاں اے لال میں ڈھونڈوں کہاں میں تیری سیرا تیرا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین حق امام یا حسن یا حسین 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 یا حسین
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم